All right, so decided to do a modification here on my 81 301 turbo. Decided to upgrade to a cold case aluminum radiator. And in the process, I wanted to try an electric fan. Now, I'm not usually pun intended, I'm not usually a fan of an electric fan, but I wanted to try it. And one of my issues is that aftermarket electric fans, they boast about CFM rating and whatever, but a lot of times that CFM rating to me seems to be low. And most aftermarket fans are of a slim design. They're to conserve space. Also, if it's like a twin fan setup, they'll go and they'll cover the entire core of the radiator with aluminum or some kind of shroud, but it's really thin. It's really close to the core. And then they'll place these two fans on this shroud of some sort. And in my opinion, that kind of is a restriction. And the reason I say that is that once the car is at speed and it's going down the road, or even if it's going 60 miles an hour, air can't flow through the radiator naturally. It's going to come in through the core and it's going to hit this shroud and it's going to be forced to go through the holes of the fan, which in my opinion would be kind of hard to do. So in doing some research, what other people were using, a lot of people, I originally tried to go, number one, OE fans. You can buy them new from most part stores, depending on what it's for. I had a lot of success with an AMC car that I put dual electric fans on it from a Ford Contour. Ordered them new, and those fit the AMC radiator almost perfect. Like it took up the entire core. It had twin fans on it. They drew a ton of CFM, a lot of air. They had two speeds to them. You flipped them both on high, and it threw air like crazy. So I originally tried to go OE LS1 fans for a 4th gen Firebird. It looked like it would have fit the core pretty decently, but I couldn't get it to fit behind the factory fan shroud. The factory fan shroud on a Firebird is what holds the radiator into the core support. It's bolted at the bottom, it's bolted at the top. That's what actually retains the radiator in the core support. Now, I did see that somebody finally came out with some sort of bracket or whatever you want to plate to retain the radiator at the top of the core. I didn't really want to go that route. I wanted to keep my factory fan shroud if possible. So since the LS1 fans didn't fit in the core, it didn't fit in the factory shroud, they were too tall. The staggered fans didn't fit in the hole very well where the original mechanical fan was. So in my research, I tried to look around for an OE fan that was a single fan, a large single fan. And a lot of hot rodders out there on forums and stuff had mentioned about the Ford Taurus, Ford Thunderbird, and also the Lincoln Mark 8 fans. Now, everybody says that the Lincoln Mark 8 fan was like the best one. It drew the most CFM. It was the best one out there. But the manufacturer, there's no reproduction replacement fan for a Mark 8. You were pretty much stuck trying to find one out of a junkyard. They claimed that the Thunderbird fan didn't spin as fast or didn't draw as much CFM, but was still very good. Then there was the Ford Taurus fan. This is what I use, is the Ford Taurus fan. The Ford Taurus fan, 17-inch in diameter, where the stock mechanical fan on the 301 turbo was 18.5. So it was pretty close to the same diameter. I like the shroud layout of the Taurus fan. It seemed to be a little more it was just easier to actually fit it in the shroud itself. So this is the Ford Taurus fan, and excuse the heat is on right now. The Ford Taurus fan, 2 speeds. It's very easy to wire. I don't have it wired up right now, but if we come in close to this, there's 3 wires. I don't know the colors offhand. I do know black is ground, but there's 3 wires here. One is actually for a low speed setting. The other, if you power up the other one, is for a high speed setting. And then of course you have the ground. This fan itself, it did have a little tab right here that I had to cut off so it would clear. And actually, if you look at this fan, I have it mounted upside down on the core. The reason I did that is if you look at the factory shroud, it seems like the factory shroud is kind of pushed over, or maybe the radiator shoved over towards the driver's side. So the factory shroud is actually, there's more area here and then less area here. So I wanted to try to center the fan. I like the fact that it had a little bit of a shroud here to pull more air through the core, but I got to leave this side of the core open for any natural airflow to come through at speed. The factory shroud is actually going to come past this, and it's actually going to stick up higher. So any air that wants to come through can actually bypass the fan when the car is actually driving down the road. Same on this side. So how did I go about mounting it? Well, I centered it on the core, and I centered it where the hole in the shroud would be. And centering it on the core up and down, you can see it just fits. It sticks up maybe just a little bit on this side. Oh no, it's pretty flush. It's pretty flush there. It's basically about the height of the core, which is great. Again, it's mounted upside down. Technically, it would be flipped the other way on a Taurus. Real cheap way of mounting it. I know it looks like I just put screws right into my radiator, but technically this is just a piece of channel. It's a reinforcement for the core, and it's also just welded on the ends here between the tanks. There is no water here. The only place that there's water on this is actually in these tubes in between the fins. This is not a tube. This is just a flat piece of aluminum for the last row of fins. So there's no water here. These are hollow. So I was able to put my drill point screws in here and not hurt the radiator. The bracket, I found these at the hardware store. They're actually, I believe, to make some kind of wooden framework, maybe for a window or something. They worked out really well. I actually made sure to place it to the edge of this reinforcement here, and then also to the edge of here. Now the radiator can't slide left to right. It's supporting the weight of the fan motor as it hangs down. There was you can kind of see that it had this notch here. There was a gap all the way up. So what I did was I found some really thick, dense stick-on foam. This was like window sealer or something from the hardware store. But I pinned it with these really tiny little screws here. And the reason I pinned it, I had worked at a company that did a lot of heat exchangers. You don't want this foam to get sucked into the fan blades. You'll bust the fan blade, you'll jam the fan, whatever. So I kind of put these short screws in here just to kind of retain. I mean, even though this foam is sticky on one side, there's no guarantee that it's going to last forever and actually stay stuck on the fan shroud. I didn't have enough compression to actually squeeze it. It barely is squeezed. But pinning it here was so that if it did try to move, it would hold it in place. But I wanted to make sure I didn't go so long that it actually got into the core and cause a leak. So that was, and then so we have our support at the bottom, kind of retaining it at the bottom. I retained it then with these zip ties. These are for like putting in an auxiliary cooler, like a transmission cooler or something. It's kind of a zip tie in a way. It goes in between the fins, comes out the other side, and then there's a disc on the other side to pull it, kind of like a zip tie. So these holes were already in the shroud, so I just put one here, and then at the top there was a spot right there. I drilled a hole in the shroud, in the plastic of the shroud, and passed one through the top there. So that's retaining the entire fan assembly from falling out. We're supporting it at the bottom, but then we're retaining it from falling out at the top. Actually, it worked out pretty well, I thought. So the only thing left was the wiring. And to do the wiring, we're going to have the Holley Sniper actually control the speeds of the fan. We have one relay for each fan speed. I believe this is low, this is high. And I have to wire them to whatever the wire is here for high and low, and then run a separate ground. The ground coming off this fan motor is going to go straight to my battery. We have power coming into the relays off of the battery, which instead of a fuse, I decided to go with a 50 amp circuit breaker. This fan can draw a lot of amperage, especially if it's trying to start on high from a dead stop. There's going to be a huge amperage draw. So I decided to go with a circuit breaker here, which is basically a resettable fuse. If something were to happen, the fan got jammed, it was drawing serious amps for whatever reason, this would open up and kill the power. But once it cooled down, it would reset and try again. This is going to be kind of hidden behind the factory fan shroud. So I wanted it to be somewhat accessible, somewhat hidden, but I didn't want to have to worry about a lot of maintenance. Coming in with power is going to be straight off the battery. We're gonna bring power in off the battery. So we're going to power up these relays with this. The ground side of the relays, these are going to go to my Holley Sniper. There's wiring on the Holley Sniper to control 2 fans, but instead of controlling 2 separate fans, we're controlling 2 separate relays for 2 different speeds. So we'll figure out, which one's fan 1, which one's fan 2. We're going to wire those up. I'm also thinking of wiring up a toggle switch in here straight to ground to run inside the car so that I can override the Holley system and actually make the fans come on whenever I want, or if I have the car parked and I want to let it cool down, I can run the fan while the car is shut off and just have the fan run to cool down the radiator. So that takes care of the wiring on it. We are not going to be running the transmission cooler because I have an auxiliary cooler that is going in front of the heater core, going in front of my air conditioning condenser in front of the car. So we're not going to be using those. Everything else should hook up. I've used these radiators before in a couple other Firebird applications. They actually fit pretty well. I like the design because it has these stamps, no, it's not steel, but a stamped style tank for the radiator. It gives it more of a factory look rather than a fully fabricated rectangular tank. That's why I like these. But let's get this installed. I'll show you how everything fits and get it wired up, and we can see what we got going on here. All right, so the radiator's in, and basically it just went in like a stock radiator using the factory shroud, rubber mounts and everything, got it all put in there. Fits pretty nice. And as we can see, and hopefully you can get a view, there's the electric fan in there. There's my electrical wiring for the relays and my circuit breaker for power to it. Excuse my overflow bottle at the moment. My other one cracked, so I had to put something on there. So here it is from this side. Maybe we can get a better view. There's the fan. It actually fits pretty nice. We're going to see if it's got enough cooling capability. But I don't have the radiator hoses. Well, I got the lower one on. Don't have the radiator hoses attached yet. The upper one, my upper radiator hose, for some reason has a smaller connection than the outlet of this aluminum radiator. My factory copper brass one had a smaller, well, I guess that's the inlet. I did buy a new radiator hose, and that seems to have a bigger outlet on it, so it should fit just fine. I think this one probably did, and somebody cut it to the smaller diameter. But we're going to get that put on too. But we got to get it wired up, and that's why we have wiring kind of hanging out here. This is the power and ground for the fan itself, and then we have a couple. These are the ground wires, the activation wires for the relay. These are going to get hooked up to the Holley system to turn the relays on, to turn the fan on depending on the speed. So we're going to get that all wired up and see how it does. All right, fan's all wired up, and you can kind of see some of the wiring there. But we've got the ground side of the high and low relays wired up to the Holley Sniper system. The Holley Sniper comes with electric fan outputs as grounds already part of the system. So all we have to do is turn it on. So maybe I can get it focused in here. But right now the electric fans are turned off on the current tune that's in it. So we'll actually activate these and make them active, or turn them on. And we can set the temperatures. Now, what I want to do here first is I'm going to upload this to the car. We're going to send it to the ECU. It says you've made changes, you're gonna have to key off, but we'll do that in a second. Okay, close that. All right, everything's on. What I want to do is I'm going to come up here, and I'm sorry for the glare. We're going to bring up and we're going to see what our current coolant temp is. Now it's saying we're at 75 degrees right now. So what I want to do is I'm just testing the system. There's actually no coolant in it. So what I'm going to do is actually see if I can come in, and I have to actually go offline on it first to do this. I'm going to come over to the basic IO? Yeah, so electric fans are active. We're going to change this, that we're going to make fan 1 come on. So we have to lower this so that it comes on somewhere around wherever the temperature is, I would assume. So if we change this to come on at 74, and we'll say off at 73, which it'll never probably get there. Well, I will say 72. And then we'll make this, we'll leave this for right now. Let's just see what happens. It should kick the fan on low. So if we send this, yep, there it is. Fan's on low. All right. So let's go back in. We'll go to basic IO again. Let's kick this one on next, 74 also. Kick off at 72. We're going to send this. Now it should go to high. There we go. Fans are working. Even though there's no coolant in it. But that works. Moving on. So it is now months later after installing the electric fan, because when I first put it in, it was pretty cold outside, and I thought that was going to skew the results. I wanted it to get warmer out before I actually gave an update, and happy to say that it works very well. We actually took the car on Firebird Fest right before Memorial Day and drove it, I don't know how many miles, but it works very well. I have it set up. Granted, I have a 160 thermostat in the car right now, but the fans don't come on. I think I have them set somewhere around 175 is the low speed, and if it still hasn't cooled the engine down, I believe if it gets over 180, 185, it kicks on to high speed. And so far it's been working really well. I don't think I've ever seen it go over 200. I know these cars, it's kind of common to see them overheat. Not overheat, I shouldn't say that. It's common to see them creep up in temp very slowly at highway speeds. And even my car does it, even with this cold case radiator and everything. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I think it's just, it might be an RPM thing due to the 3-speed transmission. Maybe someday when we go to an overdrive, we'll test that theory out and see if the temps are a little more stable. But for right now, it's working very well. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.